Hello and welcome back to some more of yesterday's RAM. In this video we'll be taking a look at some of the legendary hardware and games of 2011 that are the stuff of legend. First is the i7 2600K running in a 4-core 4-thread configuration, because an i5 is enough for gaming and I'm too cheap to spend the £8 Great British pounds on an i5 2500K. We'll be pairing it with the legendary Nvidia GTX 560 Ti 1GB and seeing how it runs some of the legendary games from 2011 in 1080p in 2023. Yes, it's a little dusty and my cable management is rubbish, but it works. An i7 2600K can be purchased these days for around 28 Great British pounds, or $34 and a Z68 motherboard can also be picked up for around the same price. This combo formed the heart of my gaming rig from 2014 right up until 2019. I purchased this MSI GTX 560 Ti 1GB on eBay for around 18 Great British pounds, or around $22, but around 25 Great British pounds, $30 seems to be about average. A new CPU needs Cinebench. Here's the single core results: 694 points. Not bad. The multi-core performance fits, with the 4 Sandy Bridge cores at 3.7 GHz delivering 2,595 points. The graph shows that the i7 2600K has the second fastest single-thread score, losing only to the much newer i3 6100. For multi-core performance, the i7 again comes second, losing to the 12-thread X5670, but that's 4 threads versus 12. Not bad. Heaven 4.0 now for the GTX 560 Ti 1GB. I'm sorry, I've no idea why the video is so dark. I recorded using OBS. With an average frame rate of 37.7 FPS and a score of 949 points, let's see how this compares to previous cards. The GTX 560 Ti on the i7 2600K with 4 threads puts in the lowest score at these settings. It's quite a bit behind the 7850 1GB, and that was running on the Phenom 2 X4 980, which is less capable than the i7 2600K. Thinking about price points, I paid 18 Great British pounds for the GTX 560 Ti and 19 Great British pounds for the 7850 1GB. The 7850 1GB would be worth the additional 1 Great British pounds, and it also uses less power. Our first game from 2011 is Dawn of War 2 Retribution, released in March and with a Metacritic score of 80 out of 100. I played the first Dawn of War all the way through, however I found the Imperial Guard DLC quite challenging. Here's the game settings for the benchmark. The system delivers a solid average frame rate of 78.5 FPS and a decent 1% low of 30.8 FPS. However, our 0.1% low is 17.7 FPS, so there are some stutters present. We've seen this before in 1GB cards, such as the 7850 1GB. A 1GB card isn't ideal for 1080p gaming, but when this card was released, the most common screen resolutions in use were all less than 900p. Released in March 2011 and with a Metacritic score of 86, Crysis 2 is the sequel to the hardware-melting Crysis, the game which spawned the phrase, "Can it run Crysis?" Well, yes it can. Less demanding than its predecessor on account of being developed for PS3 and Xbox 360 as well, we're running on Extreme, which is about medium presets, with high-res textures. Settings are on screen. I encountered a strange bug that doesn't appear to have been fixed. My frame rate became locked at a maximum of 25 frames per second, despite VSync being off. Manually setting a higher refresh rate seems to have resolved. This system delivered an average frame rate just shy of 60 frames per second at 56.9 FPS, a respectable 1% low of 30.9 FPS, and a cinematic 0.1% low of 22.3 FPS. Should be enough for relatively smooth gameplay in Crysis 2, but you might want to drop to the very high presets to get an average frame rate over 60 frames per second. Released in April 2011, Portal 2 is one of my favourite games. I'd overlooked the series for a long time. Portal came with my copy of the orange box, and I'd left it unplayed. Bored one night, I started it up and was hooked. I bought Portal 2 on release and thoroughly enjoyed the humour and gameplay of the sequel. I'm not alone in praising this title, as it has a Metacritic score of 95. Here are the exact settings benchmarked. This is the first Source Engine game I've benchmarked, so I'm not sure if this wild fluctuation in frame times are normal or as a result of the high average frame rate. The system delivers an average frame rate of 204 FPS, a 1% low of 54.8 FPS, and a seemingly terrible 0.1% low of 4.8 FPS. There were stutters during gameplay, possibly down to the lack of VRAM on the GTX 560 Ti 1GB, although 4.8 FPS does seem very low. Released in May 2011, The Witcher 2 scores 88 on Metacritic. Running the auto detect for best settings, I was disappointed that it recommended low spec. Settings are on screen. On this system, we scored the best average frame rate of 69. Nice. The 1% and 0.1% lows are both above 30 frames per second, so we should have a smooth experience playing The Witcher 2 on this system. Noir was released on PC in May 2011 and has a Metacritic score of 83. I see we've got dark video again. Sorry about that. The game settings are on screen. It looks like we have a frame rate cap in place, so we'll need to consider that in future comparisons. The system scores an average of 29.9 frames per second, a 1% low of 25.1 FPS, and a 0.1% low of 19 FPS. A playable performance on this system with the GTX 560 Ti 1GB. World of Tanks, I think, was released in August 2011, but that might be wrong, and it's still going as of February 2023. World of Tanks has a Metacritic score of 80. It felt like a playable experience. Here are the game settings. Let's see the benchmark results. Our 2011 system delivers an average frame rate of 62.2 FPS, with a 1% low of 39.8 FPS, but the 0.1% low drops to 18.7 FPS. I'm guessing this is down to the 1GB frame buffer on the GTX 560 Ti, and it'll be interesting to see the results from cards with more VRAM. Deus Ex Human Revolution was released in August 2011. In my mind, the original Deus Ex was one of the best video games ever made. While Human Revolution has a Metacritic score of 90, I still feel it's missing something special from the first game. Running with the normal presets with MLAA enabled, the benchmark results for Deus Ex Human Revolution on this system are very nice. We have an average frame rate of 59.9 FPS, probably hitting a 60 frames per second cap. Our 1% low is 58.6 FPS, and our 0.1% low is 57.5 FPS. Lovely tight timings from our system indicating silky smooth gameplay in Deus Ex Human Revolution at these settings. Batman Arkham City was released in October 2011 and has a Metacritic score of 91. It's one I've actually finished, and I'm looking forward to Arkham Origins. I enabled the DirectX 11 features and tessellation as we have a DX11 card. Settings are on screen. Gameplay was mostly okay apart from a massive hitch while benchmarking that will have an impact on our results. We have a good average frame rate of 55.4 frames per second, however our 1% low is 13.6 FPS and our 0.1% low is 6.4 FPS. There was at least one quite severe stutter on the benchmark run. Enabling the DX11 features might have been a mistake. To get smoother gameplay on this system, you're going to need to turn some settings down. Also released in October 2011 was Battlefield 3, which has a Metacritic score of 89. I'm not sure how much longer the Battlefield 3 community will put up with me, as during my benchmark game I was told I was doing everything wrong. We're using a resolution of 1080p with medium presets. We see an average frame rate of 67.2 FPS, with a 1% low of 45.9 FPS and a 0.1% low of 23.9 FPS. Gameplay should be smooth, but you might want to drop to low presets for a more competitive experience. Released in November 2011, Skyrim has a Metacritic score of 94. When I first launched the game, it selected the ultra high preset. Nice. But this is the frame rate we got, around 20 frames per second. So I went back and selected the medium preset at 1080p resolution. Checking the benchmark, we have a very tight result for Skyrim, with an average frame rate of 59.9 FPS, hitting the 60 frames per second cap. Our 1% low of 59.4 FPS and the 0.1% low of 56.1 FPS tell us this is great performance at these settings. Skyrim will run silky smooth on this system. Also released in November 2011 was Saints Row the Third, which has a Metacritic score of 84. This is the remaster released in 2020, as I don't have the original in my collection. It auto-selected medium settings, but these were a little choppy. After dropping settings to low, gameplay was much smoother. We see an average frame rate of 46 frames per second, a 1% low of 31.6 FPS and a 0.1% low of 29.4 FPS. Not bad on a 12-year-old system. Our final title, also released in November 2011, is Assassin's Creed Revelations, which has a Metacritic score of 80. Settings are on screen now. Revelations runs with an average frame rate of 110.5 frames per second. Wow. But our 1% low of 41.1 FPS and the 0.1% low of 16 FPS tell us we're going to have some big variations in our frame rate and could experience some hitching or stuttering during gameplay. It's conclusion time. How did our mid-range system from 2011 hold up with some 2011 games in 2023? Well, every game was playable and you would have had a lot of fun with this system back in the day. In 2023 though, there are better graphics cards available at this price point, such as the 7851GB and the R9 270. Also, for some reason at this point in time, the GTX 570 is cheaper at 20 Great British Pounds. We'll have to see how that does later on. I don't think we've stretched the i7 2600K yet. We'll have to see how it does in some newer titles. Speaking of titles, there were some absolute classics released in 2011 that are still worth a playthrough today. Portal 2 and Arkham City come to mind. I wanted to test this system with some modern titles to see how it held up 12 years later, but it looks like my GTX 560 Ti has gone faulty. It lasted long enough to benchmark all the games, but now is showing classic signs of faulty memory, with artifacts displayed across the screen. The modern game comparison will have to wait for our next card. What other GPU could you have purchased for a mid-range system in 2011? Well, the legend that is the AMD HD 6950, and we'll be taking a look at that card in a future video. That's all for now. Catch you later, Rammers. Bob out.
Do you know what? It just goes to show people with brain damage are the real heroes in the end, aren't they, at the end of the day?